Monday, the 9th of June. Welcome to the President's Daily Brief. Look at that. We are just speeding through the month. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. All right, let's get briefed. We'll start things off with a fascinating leak out of Moscow. A secret Russian intelligence memorandum just surfaced, and it calls China, quote, the enemy. Now, that's the same China that Putin claims to have a no-limits friendship with. Man, first there's the breakup between Elon Musk and President Trump, and now, well, it looks like Putin and Xi Jinping are fighting in front of the kids. Long-distance relationships always are tough, though. We'll break it down. Later in the show, Kharkiv has just suffered what officials are calling the most powerful Russian attack of the entire war, and U.S. intelligence warns that this may only be the beginning. Plus, chaos in California. President Trump has deployed the National Guard to Los Angeles after violent anti-ICE riots broke out in the city. We'll look at those details. And in today's Back of the Brief, Israel's defense minister has ordered the military to intercept a Gaza-bound flotilla involving climate activist Greta Thunberg, instructing the IDF to stop the vessel by any means necessary. Now, I honestly didn't have a naval battle between Greta Thunberg and the Israeli Navy on my 2025 list of bizarre things that could happen. But first, today's PDB Spotlight. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin called it a, quote, friendship without limits. But a new report from the New York Times suggests the growing partnership between China and Russia may be, well, more fragile than either side is letting on. And as usual with any complex relationship, well, it's a matter of trust. A leaked Russian intelligence memo reveals that behind closed doors, Moscow's security services view China not as a trusted ally, but as a serious threat. The document, authored by a secretive unit of the FSB, that's Russia's domestic intelligence agency, refers to China explicitly as, quote, the enemy. Now, the memo outlines an internal program called Entente 4. That's a counterintelligence operation launched just days before Russia invaded Ukraine back in 2022. Its goal is to combat Chinese espionage. According to the FSB, Beijing has ramped up efforts to steal sensitive military technology, recruit Russian scientists, and exploit Russia's distraction in Ukraine to gather intelligence. Well, if you can't trust your no-limits friend, who can you trust? Among China's key interests are Russia's use of drones, its countermeasures against Western-supplied weapons, and advanced military research, particularly in aviation. The FSB says China has specifically targeted disaffected or financially struggling Russian researchers, including those who once worked on the now-abandoned Ekranoplan project. That was a Soviet-era hovercraft warship. But the concerns don't stop there. The memo warns that Chinese intelligence has been operating under cover of university partnerships. Now, that's a standard Chinese intel practice, as well as mining companies, especially in Russia's Arctic territory, where Beijing sees strategic value in newly accessible shipping lanes and energy projects. Moscow also accuses Chinese academics of laying the groundwork for territorial claims by promoting research that ties China's ancient history to land now controlled by Russia. Chinese nationalists have long resented 19th century treaties that ceded vast areas of land, including modern-day Vladivostok, to the Russian Empire. The so-called, quote, unequal treaties remain a sore point in Chinese historical memory and help explain why Russian intelligence is so sensitive to any Chinese activity in the region. And while these espionage efforts are ramping up, the FSB is instructing its officers to proceed carefully. The memo warns that publicly acknowledging China as a threat could damage critical bilateral ties. Well, frankly, I, for one, would hate to damage their friendship by talking about this issue. I mean, that would make me a homewrecker. Now, since the start of the war in Ukraine, Russia has become increasingly dependent on China to keep its economy afloat. China now buys over a third of Russian exports and has replaced many Western firms that fled after sanctions were put in place. The Kremlin is leaning hard on Beijing, and that economic imbalance, well, it gives China leverage. So, you ask yourself over your morning coffee, what does this mean? Well, first it reveals a deep split within the Russian government. While Putin and Xi continue to toast their alliance, Russian counterintelligence doesn't trust Beijing and is working quietly to contain its influence. Second, it offers potential leverage for the U.S. Some American officials believe Russia's growing unease well, could be used to drive a wedge between Moscow and Beijing, perhaps peeling Russia away from the China axis. Others are less optimistic, noting that Putin appears willing to accept these risks in exchange for Chinese support. And that is probably a more realistic view on how this situation will play out. Okay, now before we go to break, a quick note. The President's Daily Brief is now on Facebook. I know hundreds of thousands of you have been asking, when are we going to be on Facebook? Well, it's happened. So for updates and more news and analysis, you can follow us now at facebook.com/President's Daily Brief. Again, that's facebook.com/President's Daily Brief. See, all you had to do was ask, and we made it happen. We'll see you there. Coming up next, riots erupt in Los Angeles as President Trump sends in the National Guard. And Russia unleashes its most powerful strike yet on Kharkiv, with more retaliation likely on the way. I'll be right back. Hey, Mike Baker here. Let me take just a few seconds of your time to talk about your personal finances and your hard-earned savings and how to protect them. Look, did you know that in the last 12 months, gold's value has jumped 30%? That's right. And central banks, well, guess what they're doing? They're buying gold in record amounts. Look, with the usual ups and downs in the stock market and general uncertainty over the global economy and, of course, the trade wars, and don't forget those pesky BRICS nations pushing hard to replace the U.S. dollar, it's no wonder that thousands of Americans are turning to Birch Gold Group. Because in times of uncertainty, well, gold can offer peace of mind. Birch Gold makes it easy to convert your IRA or your 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. Or, like a lot of folks, you can just buy gold to store at home. Just text PDB to 989-898, and Birch Gold will send you a free information kit on gold. There's no obligation. It's just useful information. With an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of happy customers, take control of protecting your savings today. Text PDB to the number 989-898. Welcome back to the PDB. In what appears to be the latest wave of Russian retaliation for last weekend's crippling drone strike on its airfields, Moscow launched a punishing barrage on the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv on Saturday. As we've been tracking here on the PDB, the expected escalation follows last week's devastating Ukrainian drone operation that reportedly destroyed or disabled over a third of Moscow's long-range bombers and high-value surveillance planes. That assault is likely the single worst day in the history of the Russian Air Force, and a blow that perhaps cost the Kremlin billions of rubles. Now, this weekend's barrage on Ukraine's second-largest city, just 20 miles from the Russian border, consisted of at least 40 explosions in just a few hours, as Russia unleashed a lethal mix of missiles and glide bombs and drones arcing toward residential districts. Video footage of the attacks showed charred apartment buildings and a children's playground littered with shrapnel. 3 civilians were killed, and dozens more were wounded. President Zelensky condemned the strike as, quote, pure terrorism, while Kharkiv's mayor called the targeting of civilian sites, quote, outright terror against peaceful Kharkiv, branding it as the most intense bombardment since Russia's full-scale invasion began. Well, then came round 2, just hours later. As rescue crews searched through the rubble, Russia launched another wave of airstrikes. Guided bombs slammed into more residential districts, killing 2 more civilians and injuring at least 40 others. That's according to local officials. Zelensky, in his nightly address, condemned the strikes as deliberate and senseless acts of violence, stating, quote, bombs on civilians in the city, even a children's playground nearby. This makes no military sense. He warned that Russia was preparing to escalate further and was ignoring all peace proposals. He also urged the U.S. to send, quote, specific signals related to backing his country's defense. But Kyiv may be in for a longer wait. That message comes as Zelensky awaits a response to its formal offer to purchase additional U.S. air defense systems. But last week, the Pentagon notified Congress that some drone fighting technology, originally earmarked for Ukraine, is now being diverted to protect U.S. personnel in the Middle East. Meanwhile, Russia claimed full credit for Saturday's destruction. Its Ministry of Defense boasted of, quote, high-precision strikes on what they claimed was Ukrainian military infrastructure, and said all, quote, designated targets were destroyed. According to Kharkiv's prosecutor, however, civilian sites, including a music school and an administrative building, were damaged. Russia's Ministry of Defense said it used more than 50 drones, 4 aerial bombs, and a missile in the assault. And this may be just the beginning. According to U.S. officials speaking to Reuters, the full scale of Moscow's retaliation hasn't even been felt yet. One senior official described the coming counterattack as, quote, asymmetrical, not a tit-for-tat drone response, but a wider assault on symbolic targets like government buildings should be expected. Another official said bluntly, quote, it will be huge, vicious, and unrelenting. With Putin signaling a willingness to keep ratcheting up the pressure and Kharkiv reeling from its deadliest day of the war, Ukrainian officials say they are bracing for continued escalation from Moscow in the days to come. Okay, shifting to the U.S., violence in Los Angeles, California erupted into federal intervention over the weekend as President Trump deployed 2,000 National Guard troops to the city following days of riots against the actions of Immigration and Customs Enforcement personnel, commonly known as ICE agents. Clashes broke out Friday and Saturday near a Homeland Security office in the predominantly Latino city of Paramount, that's south of L.A., where hundreds of masked rioters hurled rocks and cement at Border Patrol vehicles, set cars on fire, and tagged federal property with graffiti. Fires burned unchecked in several areas as plumes of smoke rose into the sky, while officers in riot gear pushed back with tear gas, flashbangs, and rubber rounds in an effort to regain control. The violence followed a string of ICE immigration sweeps across Los Angeles that netted at least 118 immigrant arrests, including 5 individuals with ties to criminal networks. That's according to the Department of Homeland Security. Federal sources said more arrests are likely as ICE continues its sweep. But by Saturday night, the riots had escalated to the point where Trump signed a presidential memorandum activating the National Guard under Title X authority, placing troops directly under his command, bypassing California Governor Gavin Newsom. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt made clear that the memo was necessary to, quote, address the lawlessness that's been allowed to fester, and called the ICE raids, quote, essential to halting and reversing the invasion of illegal criminals into the U.S. Trump took to Truth Social, announcing a ban on masks at the riots, a direct response to what the administration sees as deliberate efforts to conceal violent offenders, posting, quote, riots and looters will be solved the way it should be solved. In the same post, he took aim at California liberal leadership and L.A. Mayor Karen Bass, writing, quote, just look at how they handled the fires, and now they're very slow permitting disaster. Newsom responded by calling Trump's actions inflammatory and warned that they would, quote, only escalate tensions. In a post on X, he accused the White House of, quote, wanting a spectacle and urged Californians not to give them one. Well, that seems a little late. National Guard troops from the 79th Infantry Brigade Combat Team were seen arriving in tactical gear outside federal buildings in downtown L.A. Meanwhile, more confrontations erupted in neighboring Compton, where rioters faced off with officers behind barbed wire barricades. Law enforcement declared unlawful assemblies at multiple locations, including a federal detention center, and confirmed additional arrests, some involving individuals already under standing deportation orders. Let me just repeat that. Some of those arrested already had previous deportation orders, and yet were in the country protesting and attacking ICE personnel. With violence spreading, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced that active-duty Marines based at Camp Pendleton, which is some 80 miles south, had been placed on high alert. In a post on X, Hegseth warned, quote, if violence continues, active-duty Marines will be mobilized. FBI Director Kash Patel also weighed in, telling Fox News, quote, if you assault a law enforcement officer, you're going to jail, period. It doesn't matter where you came from, how you got here, or what cause you claim to represent, end quote. He added that if state and local officials won't back ICE and police, then the Bureau will. On Sunday morning, Trump praised the National Guard's performance, posting, quote, great job by the National Guard in Los Angeles after 2 days of violence, clashes, and unrest, adding that the continued violence was evidence of the city and state's Democrat leadership's failure. But the riots may not be over. Socialist and left-wing organizations called for mass mobilizations last night. Oh, of course they did, to drive ICE agents and federal troops out of the city. Well, that should go well for the socialists. We'll update you on those developments in today's afternoon bulletin. Okay, coming up in the back of the brief, Israel orders the military to stop a Gaza-bound flotilla carrying Greta Thunberg by any means necessary. Seems like that actually would give the activists exactly what they're hoping for, which, of course, would be a publicity. I'll have those details next. Hey, Mike Baker here. Now, look, most people know me as a former CIA dude and a businessman and a podcast host. But, well, I'm actually also quite the expert on personal hygiene. You didn't see that coming, did you? So let's talk about sweat. Hey, look, you ever step outside and feel like you're instantly drenched in sweat? You know, it's hot, it's humid, and it's like no matter what you do, the sweat doesn't stop. Well, there is a solution. Introducing the Mando Deodorant Plus Sweat Control Solid Stick. It's not your average deodorant. It's clinical strength, and it delivers twice the sweat control compared to standard formulas. One swipe, and you're good to go with clinical strength sweat control. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. I said free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get 20% off site-wide. Use code PDB at shopmando.com for 20% off site-wide plus free shipping. That's shopmando.com. Now, please support our show and tell them we sent you, right? Mando's got you covered. With Deodorant Plus Sweat Control, say goodbye to those embarrassing sweat stains. You know, they are embarrassing. And hello to long-lasting freshness. In today's Back of the Brief, the latest chapter in the self-styled flotilla en route to Gaza is, well, apparently nearing its climax, as the Israeli Navy vows to intercept the protest ship carrying Greta Thunberg and other activists in the coming hours. A source told the Jerusalem Post that Israeli forces will first attempt to order the Madeleine, that's a British-flagged boat operated by the pro-Palestinian Freedom Flotilla Coalition. The acronym is FFC because even activists love an acronym. Well, they'll order it to turn back. Now, if that doesn't happen, if they refuse to turn back, the source said, quote, the Navy will calmly take control of the ship, bring them to Israel, and deport them abroad that same night, end quote. Defense Minister Israel Katz made the Jewish state's stance even clearer, saying Sunday, quote, to Greta, the anti-Semite, and her friends, I say clearly, you better turn back, because you will not reach Gaza, end quote. He's authorized the IDF to take whatever measures are necessary to enforce that. And if things weren't already theatrical enough, contact with the Madeleine was reportedly lost late last night after the vessel entered Egyptian waters. Lebanese media reports suggest that the boat may have briefly rerouted to pick up Sudanese refugees. The coalition's stated goal is to protest what it calls Israel's, quote, illegal, decades-long naval blockade and a, quote, ongoing genocide in Gaza. Those are charges that Israeli officials have dismissed as a modern-day blood libel and another entry in the anti-Israel playbook. As we've reported here on the PDB, this isn't the flotilla's first go at this maritime performative theater. The FFC has been staging sea-bound publicity stunts since about 2008 with similar results. Lots of headlines, zero success. This latest voyage comes as the Israel-Hamas war grinds past the 20-month mark. Under pressure from allies, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu agreed last month to allow basic humanitarian aid into the Strip, easing a months-long blockade. But despite those concessions, that hasn't stopped flotilla organizers from pressing ahead into a war zone. Meanwhile, the UK has reportedly refused to block the Madeleine from approaching Israeli waters. That's according to the Times of Israel, which, of course, leaves it up to the Israeli Navy to prevent this ship of tools from wading ashore in Gaza. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Monday, the 9th of June. Now, to listen to the show ad-free, well, you can do that, and it's very simple. Just become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. And as I mentioned earlier, we're now on Facebook. You can follow us there at facebook.com/President's Daily Brief, or should you have the inclination, you can check us out and subscribe on YouTube. Our YouTube channel can be found at President's Daily Brief, not to mention, although I'm about to, all the podcast platforms in podcast land. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.